information. And I haven't heard back from him since we responded, so I think it answered his questions.
Good, good. Okay, consent agenda. We've got items A through G. Are there any items anyone would like to discuss individually? Before we vote,
And I haven't heard back from him since we responded, so I think it answered his questions.
Good, good, okay. Hear a motion that we accept the consent agenda?
I move.
Okay. Dick, second?
Second.
All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, you have Mr. Lombardo who's joined us.
Yeah, I see him. Good morning, Dick. All right, we're on to the
Good
information.
morning. Sorry, I was late.
Oh, no problem. On to items H through K. We don't need to have a vote. Does anyone have a question about any of the items H through K? I want to discuss them before we move on. Okay. Item 2, Built to Learn implementational update. Cassandra?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everyone should be able to see my screen now. So at our last several meetings, the IAC has approved a number of projects for participation in the Built to Learn Act. And at the July meeting, the program MOU was approved and has now been fully executed after approval by MSA. In light of all this activity, we wanted to provide an update on the overall implementation of the Act and touch on how it's going to work in the future with other IAC programs. You all know that the IAC administers a number of legislative programs that approach facility needs from different perspectives and with various funding sources and requirements. In fact, a little later on this agenda, you'll be asked to open applications for projects through the Healthy School Facility Fund. The Built to Learn Act is one of the many programs where projects are approved by the IAC. You will remember that the Built to Learn Act was enacted in law in February of this year. And you can see on this slide how the legislation envisions a slow transition to a more cohesive and holistic IAC process, with fewer programs that are more targeted to improving school facilities to ensure that they can provide and sustain critical educational functions. ASP and SSGP, those are the Aging Schools Program and the School Safety Grant Program, are consolidated into the Priority Fund in fiscal year 27. And at that point, a few different funding pots will remain to address different critical purposes. So Built to Learn will still be in place at that point, but it is a temporary program with a set limit of funding that is meant to address a large number of schools relatively quickly. Aside from Built to Learn, in the future, there will be 3 funding sources for projects. The Priority Fund, which uses the results of the statewide facilities assessment to correct the schools with the highest needs. The Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classroom Program, that's quite a mouthful, so we usually just call it EGRC, addresses enrollment and capacity issues. And the Capital Improvement Program continues to work like it always has to address the LEA's highest priorities. So shifting back to the Built to Learn program specifically, the legislation allows MSA to issue up to $2.2 billion in revenue bonds. Based upon the funding that's available for debt service, MSA has advised us that a good working estimate for the program is about $1.8 billion as of right now. 6 counties receive specific allocation percentages under the legislation, and the other 17 counties share the remaining 11.5%. Prince George's is excluded from this because they get funding through a public-private partnership program that we'll talk about a little bit later. Before selling bonds, the IAC and MSA are required to enter into a program MOU, which was approved by the IAC at your last meeting and was approved by MSA on July 23rd. Projects are approved by the IAC on a rolling basis and are then executed by MSA. A project-specific MOU is required for each project between the MSA and the LEA after IAC approval. And one important note is that these funds can be used in combinations with other programs or other state funding. So I mentioned that the projects are subject to the IAC's eligibility requirements. Just like in the IAC's other programs after the passage of House Bill 1783 and House Bill 1, planning and design are eligible expenditures. Projects have a maximum state allocation that's set by the IAC's funding factors that include the eligible enrollment, the gross area baselines, the cost per square foot, and the state and local cost share. There were some additional requirements for Built to Learn programs. The projects that were approved first through the program were required to be B status projects. That's a status code that we use in our CIP that means that the projects were eligible, but were deferred due to fiscal constraints. The IAC also cannot reimburse for a facility that has been completed, and only projects that began on or after June 1st, 2020 are eligible for reimbursement through the program. At the May and July meetings, you all approved a total of 14 projects with an estimated state share of around 281 million. And there is one other provision I wanted to talk about, that counties with a 50% share that are forward funded, which means that the LEA spent their entire share up front and then supplanted some of the state share temporarily, can be eligible for up to 150% of the gross area baseline. Prince George's is unique under this legislation. Instead of receiving funding like the other LEAs, they get funding for its P3 program. In order to receive their funding, they must enter into a P3 for at least 6 schools by July 1 of 2024. They receive $25 million per year to support the P3 program beginning in 2026. And there are some annual and periodic reporting requirements of both the IAC and the LEA. Another piece of the legislation that's currently being implemented is that it reconstituted and extended the work group on the assessment and funding of school facilities. As you know very well, Mr. Chair, being a member of the group. The work group began meeting in early July and will have monthly meetings through the end of the year in order to meet their statutory mandates, which include deciding how the condition and educational sufficiency of a school according to the statewide facilities assessment should be used in funding decisions, and also making recommendations for adjustments to the IAC's state and local cost share percentage formula. The work group will directly contribute to the public school, their work group's work will directly contribute to the Public School Facilities Priority Fund, which is created and has mandated funding in the Built to Learn Act beginning in FY25. A couple other miscellaneous components of the bill. One is that the IAC has to develop and evaluate the life cycle costs of public school facilities. The IAC is working to develop some scoping requirements for that right now. And also MSDE, the IAC, and MSA are to work with the LEAs and community colleges to develop a CTE program or apprenticeship pathway in school maintenance that leads to an industry recognized certificate or credential. IAC staff are currently working to inventory existing credential programs to inform the next steps of that task. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Cassandra. By the way, I want to mention that the work group that Cassandra mentioned, the work group on the assessment and funding of school facilities, Bob is on that, and his staffs that committee, and they do a fabulous job. I want to commend them for their presentations. Any questions on the Built to Learn issue? I have one, I guess. So you're saying only projects in the category B are eligible for these monies?
No, so
Okay.
the legislation wanted to make sure that some projects could hit the ground running as soon as the program was implemented. So it said that the first projects funded through the program should be those with B statuses. But after that, the projects can be considered completely separate from any other program.
And let me make another point on that, which is, Mr. Chair, if it's really important, is some of the smaller LEAs with fewer resources having these design dollars available so that they might be able to know that they would be completely reimbursed, or possibly even through the CIP program, get design dollars to start to develop their projects so they can get to B status, is really going to help them move those projects up that are not B status currently.
So what determines what combination of funding is given to a project? And if it's built to learn, CIP, how is that determined?
It's determined by what the LEA would like to do.
Okay,
But we're advising them. We've started developing a pipeline of all the projects, potential projects throughout the state in every LEA about what needs to be done. What are the local priorities, and started doing cash flows below those in by quarter to see how that we might line up available dollars to projects. So CIP dollars come once a year. Of course, local dollars could come at any time, but the county executives want to know early so that they can plan for the budget. So the pipeline will help with both of those. And then the BTL dollars can marry up those dollars as well as ESSER dollars. So we're going through that exercise so that we can maximize dollars. The larger and more complete we can make projects, the more efficient and effective the spending will be.
okay. Any other questions on item 2? All right. We don't need to take any action, do we, Cassandra? On
No,
number
Mr.
2?
Chair, this item's informational.
Let's move on to item 3, Healthy School Facility Fund. Arabia.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
The Schools Facility Fund was established as a new program by legislation in calendar year 2018 and modified in 2021. Education Article 5322 requires the IAC to administer the program, approve expenditures, and develop administrative procedures. Statute also extends the program and increases the appropriation amount from $30 million to $40 million in fiscal years 23 and 24. For this fiscal year, the program includes funding from the prior year and current fiscal year. The state of Maryland also received federal funding for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning upgrades that will be administered based on these draft procedures. A breakdown of the funding year and funding sources is included in the motion. Total funds available for allocation is $100 million. Baltimore City will receive at least 50% of the funding appropriated from fiscal years 21 through 24. The state local cost share will apply, and funding recommended allocations will be based on competitive application process. With the exception of Baltimore City, no LEA will receive more than $15 million of an allocation. Funding through this program is intended to address and correct health and environmental risks that plague a number of schools. And priority funding will be recommended first on the severity of an immediate life, safety, and environmental health risk that has caused a school to close at least one time during the school year. In October of 2019, the IAC approved 53 projects totaling $30 million. 35 of those projects fell under the immediate life safety, environmental health risk category. The proposed revisions to the procedures include statutory changes such as making design, planning, architectural and engineering fees, roof projects, pipe installation, eligible expenses, and to better define the criteria used to categorize lead in drinking water outlets. Projects that remediate lead levels above 20 parts per billion would fall under the immediate threat category, and projects that address levels of lead between 5 and 20 parts per billion will be given second priority funding consideration. Staff recommends that the IAC approve recent modifications to the procedures and to begin accepting applications from local education agencies and the Maryland School for the Blind beginning tomorrow, August the 13th. If approved, the IAC will be accepting applications through a smart sheets developed by our IT division. Page 9 of the guide currently has a placeholder for step-by-step instructions on how to complete the application. We expect to have that finalized after this meeting. In closing, I wanted to say this is yet another tool to assist our local partners with providing safe and healthy environments for all occupants of Maryland public school buildings. I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Arabia? Secretary McCord.
Yes, Arabia, thanks for the presentation. I know that you've put together help put together the guide. I just want to bring to the attention that the Safe Drinking Water Act, Safe School Drinking Water Act that took effect on, I think it was June 30th this year. It takes effect June 1st of 2021. It changed the definition of the lead in the school to basically 5 parts per billion. The definition of elevated level of lead is 5 parts per billion. And I know that you have various and sundry schools with different levels of lead. I just want to make sure that it's not a criticism. It's just I want you to double back with the Attorney General's office with your agency to make sure that if there's any tweaking that needs to be done to the regulations that you've proposed based on the fact that the bill just took effect, that, if everything's okay, I can't make that determination just by looking at the regs. I know what you're trying to do, and I follow what you're trying to do. I just want to make sure that the new law that just passed is not going to cause you to change that. Or if that's been taken into account already, that's fine too. That's the only thing I'm raising.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes.
Secretary McCord, we certainly will double back with the AG to make sure. We have set, we're not, and the 5 to 20 is simply a lesser priority than the 20 and above, which is the federal EPA level. So what we want to be able to do is to take those most severe cases and address them first before we get to the even though they're important, they are considered less severe, at least at the federal level. So we have structured it that way. So we will still do all of the 5 to 20 if we have funds left over, and we will double back. We just didn't want to miss those that have a higher lead count because we diluted our available funds, and we will go back and check.
No, Mr. Director, I appreciate that, and I saw the logic in that. I just want to make sure that the logic of getting the worst ones first, I don't want to change that. I just want to make sure that going forward, we understand that the definition has changed in Maryland law, and so we'll keep an eye on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary. Yes, sir.
That. Right.
Thank you.
Secretary, do you want to hold this or?
No,
Okay.
I want them to address the worst ones first, and that's
Yes.
what they're doing. But as
Okay.
we go forward, you need to understand that once 5 parts per billion shows up in a school, we need to pay attention to that and put it on the list. So just making sure. Thank you.
Ravi, you want to repeat the motion?
Yes, to authorize IAC staff to release the Healthy School Facility Fund Administrative Procedures Guide to solicit applications from LEAs and the Maryland School for the Blind for projects that will improve the health of school facilities, and to evaluate project requests based on a competitive application process. IAC staff are authorized to make non-substantive, edits as necessary.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. On to item 4, FY 2022 Comprehensive Maintenance Plan. Alex?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the
Morning.
Commission. It is my privilege to present as an informational item today the IAC's recently released instructions for the fiscal year 2022 Comprehensive Maintenance Plans. Under the IAC's regulations, each LEA must submit to the IAC each year a local Board of Education approved comprehensive maintenance plan that is compatible with its local educational facilities master plan and its local capital improvement program. The purpose of the annual comprehensive maintenance plan is to communicate to the LEA's stakeholders, including the state, the LEA's intentions for the coming fiscal year for its facilities maintenance program. In past years, the LEAs were guided in constructing their CMPs only by a few paragraphs of information that the IAC had in its Administrative Procedures Guide. No metrics or key data elements were specified, and little guidance was given regarding the strategic and operational content that would shed useful light on the LEA's maintenance program. Following input from LEAs, as well as staff research and development, this year we have significantly revised and improved the CMP instructions in order to provide far more detailed guidance to the LEAs. This year's instructions will lead to CMPs that are far more comparable and useful to both local readers and the state. It is understood that LEA's data collection, accounting, and reporting methodologies and capabilities differ, and that some of the data elements below in the instructions may not have historically been collected, tallied, or generated, or perhaps are not currently available or easily available to all the LEAs. Because of this, staff expect to exercise considerable flexibility in working with the LEAs around their CMP submissions and expect to accept CMPs this year that do not necessarily meet all of the requirements specified in the instructions. To submit a CMP that does not comply fully with the instructions, LEA staff should notify Scott in advance and coordinate with him to identify appropriate modifications. We look forward to working with each LEA as they develop even more useful comprehensive maintenance plans for fiscal 22 and following years. Scott and I now stand for any questions you may have.
Any questions from anyone?
Mr. Chair, could I make a comment on this?
Yes.
Everything that we do is trying to fulfill the legislative direction, and mostly at the beginning, HB 1783 and now HB 1. HB 1783 required us to start developing, recording and developing and pushing out best practices that are shared amongst the LEAs. This tool will certainly help us so that we can identify with comparable information what's working best, what could be improved. And this is just another piece of the puzzle. Thank you.
Sure. Any questions on Alex's comments? Secretary McCord.
Yeah, just to comment, this is a lot of good work and a lot of work in the right direction, bringing everybody with different capabilities into the same way of thinking about how we need to look at schools. So commend the work that's been done, and hopefully the flexibility that you talk about can help everybody head in the right direction. So thank you very much. Good work.
Yeah, I think it's important. Alex, you want to repeat the motion?
Well, this is just an informational item,
Oh, is
so
it?
there is no
Okay.
motion
You
required.
don't have to approve it, what you're doing. Okay, good. Okay.
Thank you very
let's-
much.
Early. Let's move on to item 5, Baltimore City HVAC project status report. Jamie.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Case-Meyer, members of the commission. It is good to see you all. Before you
too.
to deliver item 5, an informational item, the extra $15 million for Baltimore City HVAC project status report. The item can be found on page 475 of your agenda, and the information is current as of July 28. I'll start with project status. As of July 28, we have 14 of 19 projects operational. That's 74%. 4 are currently in construction and 1 is currently in design. Of those projects, as I said, 14 are operational. 3 of them are behind by less than 2 months and 2 are behind by more than 2 months. I'll just take a moment to touch on a few of those projects. Thomas Johnson has some material delays. They do expect to have that done by the end of the calendar year. Westport just needs balancing punch list items, and they expect to have that ready for the start of the school year. Windsor Hills, they hope to be done by heating season for that one. Again, they had some equipment delays. Harlem Park is just awaiting electrical changeover, and they're expecting that to be complete this week. And then Callaway is probably the largest exception. As you remember, that was sort of the last project to move forward in order to make sure that their other priorities were completed. So Callaway had been on hold for a bit of a time. And then the original scope was for unit vent replacement only, and the Baltimore City was kicking in local funds for pipe insulation replacement. However, when scoping commenced, they found that the pipes, in fact, needed to be replaced. And during that time, the boiler also failed. And so the local is kicking in quite a bit more money just to finish the job. So that the scope is increased quite a bit. and design will continue at least for the next 4 to 6 months. That said, I will now stand for questions.
Any questions or comments on Jamie's presentation? Okay, thank you. That's all for the staff. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Surely. Before we adjourn, I just wanted to bring up a couple of items. One, we have been talking about the possibility of having a vice chair and also a formation of subcommittees. And we find that, we have no bylaws that allow those to occur as of now. So we've asked the staff and DLS, Department of Legislative Services, to propose some potential bylaws for our review. Hopefully we can get that done next month. In addition, at the end of the meetings, possibly, and if we'd be interested in your suggestions, have some presentations from DLS regarding the trends in legislation regarding the subject matter that we cover, so that we can more fully understand, all that's going on. So, and finally, I guess from my perspective, regarding in-person meetings, I think at least through October, we'll continue to have virtual meetings, and then see how the world's going before we consider coming back in person again. So before we adjourn, Bob would like a couple minutes to talk about something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With your permission, I'd like to take a moment to recognize Kim Spivey, and I'll ask her to turn her camera on, if you would, please, Kim.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is Kim's last IAC meeting.
Oh,
Yes, she's retiring. And September 1, it's a huge loss to the IAC. Kim has worked with the IAC specifically for 30 years through many transitions, has always pushed the IAC to improve. She's fun to be in meetings with because she always says, well, we already have this. Why don't we try to move it into that arena? Or that's a good idea. Maybe we can take these two and put them together. So her historical background and her problem-solving mind are going to be hugely missed. She's always pushed the IAC to improve and streamline and serve our customers and stakeholders to the best of our ability. She's leaving behind a legacy for pushing for continuous improvement. She's worked tirelessly during her tenure, and although we're devastated that she will be leaving us, we are thrilled for her to begin her next chapter of her life.
congratulations, Kim. Why don't you put your mic on so you want to say a few things?
Thank you, Bob, and thanks for those kind words. It really has been my pleasure to work with a lot of professional people through the years, a couple different executive directors and many members of the IAC. I've enjoyed my years here, and I look forward to seeing all the improvements that the IAC is working to implement now in the future. I'll probably keep watching.
Good.
Anyway, as a citizen though, and
Yes.
I do look forward to, pursuing some personal things that, when you work a lot, you
Yep.
don't always get to get complete. So, anyway.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and thank you for your years of service. We really appreciate it. Does anybody else want to say anything?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. You take care and good luck to you. Is there any more? Oh, okay. Secretary McCord sends his regards. Any other comments anyone wants to make before we adjourn? So do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
Moved.
A second?
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Okay, see you all next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.